Hey everyone, Jason here. So in the last video, we covered the dashboard, the software that controls the system, and a little bit of the data logging. In this video, I want to show you some more of the hardware build out and what the brewery system is going to look like. I've got some of it up and running, so let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing that you see here is I had to build out a little bit of a brewing enclosure just to help me mount things and keep things a little bit organized. As you can see, I'm just in my garage here. So it helps to kind of carve out a little bit of working space for this project. So first thing, the green tube on the ground here, that's going to be the inlet hose where I'm getting the water. There's also an outlet hose that will be attached on the other side there. That'll be for water coming out of the filtration system. So moving up here, you can see the electronics boxes that we went over in other videos. This one does a lot of the main controlling. It's not fully hooked up yet, but I've got a lot of it hooked up. On the left there, that's the power ground for the flow sensors. Those two wires there to control the high voltage box. And then it'll be really hard to see, but there's some 12 volt connections running on the side as well to control the valves. Then moving up here, here's the high voltage box. Right now, the only thing that's plugged in on this side is the filtration system. I haven't done the heating element yet. That'll be coming up next. So let's move around to the inside of the enclosure here. So you can see everything fits in there nicely. So starting over here, I've got the water coming in at the bottom there, and it's just passing through just a basic filter to ensure there's no major particles in the system. Then it's coming up and it's coming into the first valve here. That's just controlling on and off for the water circuit. Then it travels up here. This is the first flow meter for the inlet water. That's going into the filtration system. And so the filtration system does two things. It's a reverse osmosis system. It's a deionizing system. So it gets the water to a completely blank slate. You can see here's the main outlet for the filtered water going to a three-way valve. The three-way valve dumps out behind here, and it combines with the wastewater out of the filtration system. And that comes down here into another flow valve. So this is monitoring the wastewater coming out of the system. And that's what's getting dumped down into the other port that you saw earlier. That'll just get flushed out to my lawn or something. The other way of the three-way valve is for sending the filtered water again through another flow valve here. So this one is measuring the flow of the filtered water, and that will be coming down and going into the brew kettle to get things started. So again, 3 flow sensors, inlet, waste, and filtered. And right now we've just got 2 valves hooked up. We've got an on-off valve hooked up going into the system. And then we've got a 3-way valve hooked up. And so the reason I have a 3-way valve is to basically control the amount of filtered water that comes out. There's a little bit of delay in the system, especially with this valve. It takes a while to actually turn inside of it. So I don't want to overfill my filtered water. I want to keep that as close as possible to my target. So what this does is once the filtered water level is achieved, it just switches the flow to dump into the waste. So that way I'm not going to have, excessive water coming out, which is important, especially for a system like this, because it has a pump built in. So you can get some bursts of water through the system, especially when you're turning it on and off. It does some funny things. It can suddenly surge in pressure. And so you don't want this huge spike of water coming through the system. So right now that controls it. It just dumps everything out to the waste. That way I can have a nice secure shut off of my system. Various wire routings here. So I'm not going to go through all of it, but basically it's power and ground to the valves and to the flow meters. And then the flow meters also have signal wires that are coming back as well. And those are getting routed over here to the side. And this is my main signal in port. The way these sensors operate is basically they send interrupt signals to the board. So every time a certain volume of water goes through the valve, it basically sends out a signal, and my board interprets that. It logs the interrupt, and then it basically just counts those interrupts over time, and that's how it knows what the flow rate is. And then you can do some math to calculate things like total volume just by multiplying it by the amount of time that's passed. So that's where we're at right now. We've come a long way. So we've proved functionality of the software, of the circuits. Now we're adding in the hardware, and we're getting into more of the calibration phase with the sensors. So at this stage, really what I'm doing is I'm just running repeatedly volumes of water through the filtration system, and then measuring the water both on the filtered side and on the waste side to get an accurate reading of how much water's gone through. And then I'm comparing that to what the system's telling me and making sure that those two are aligned. And if they're not, I'm just fine-tuning the software to make sure that I'm getting good readings on the sensors. So that's really where we're at now. The next part will be getting more into the brew kettle, tapping into the temperature sensor, the heating element, and then setting up the pump system that will circulate the wort through the system, and then also it will pump the final product into the fermenter at the end. So those will be the next steps. But before we do that, what I want to do is show you on the dashboard how the system works and how it's logging data. So that'll be next. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the dashboard, how it's going to control the system and how it's going to start logging the data. The first thing I'm going to do is start up my server. Okay, so here's the dashboard. Now the first thing I'm going to do is start a session, and what this is going to do is make sure that the data gets logged to a database that I can use later to make sure that everything went well, and I'll show you that too. Okay, so session's going. You can see our system status connected. We're okay. That means we're connected to the Wi-Fi and we are receiving information from the unit. So now I'm going to systematically turn on these circuits here. The first thing I want to do is turn on number 9. That's the three-way valve that I showed you. So this is going to get it ready to start putting filtered water out into the kettle. Real quick, I want to point out this should be 12 volts. This system's acting up a little bit. I think the hardware might actually be, the chip might actually be fried or malfunctioning or something. So that's why that's off. That should be 12 volts. Obviously, it's not reading right. Okay, next we're going to turn on the sensors to make sure that we can record data. So you can see 5 volts on those. That's good. Now we're going to turn on the filtration system. So the filtration system won't work until it's receiving water. It has its own pressure valves built into it, pressure transducers. It can automatically detect, turn itself on and off. So turning it on is safe. It does nothing. It's not going to burn out the pump or anything. You can see we're reading as expected there. And then finally we're going to turn on the on-off valve to give it water. Okay, so now the system is on. I'm going to click over to the filtration page, and then you can see that we've got some numbers starting here. So typically what happens with this filtration system is that it has to bring itself up to pressure. And so what it does that I've learned is that it tends to, you tend to see big spikes on the inlet side as it's getting up to pressure, and then it starts dumping a lot of water out the waste side like immediately. And I think that's just to bring the system up to pressure. And then what you see after a small delay is that then it starts outputting the filtered water. So that's what I've kind of learned how the system acts. And again, this is kind of important to have that three-way valve in there to make sure that I'm not, dumping that water when I don't want to be into the brew kettle. So now it's kind of normalized, and you can see the rates in gallons per minute, and then also the total gallons that have gone through the system. So this is as expected. The filtered water is right around 0.1 to 0.2 gallons per minute. So this filtration system will do, I think it's 150 gallons per day. So if you do the math on that, it comes out to be about 0.1 gallons per minute. So if I'm trying to get about 7 gallons, 7 gallons, that's going to be 15 minutes, half hour-ish. So not too bad for what I'm using it for. So at this point, the data is being output to the database, and I'll show you that later. That's what's going to help us later to optimize the system, and it's also helping me calibrate the sensors right now. So the sensors just have basically a constant that's set, and it used that constant to multiply by the number of interrupts that it's received to calculate the flow rate, and then you can multiply by the total time to get the total gallons. So really what I'm doing right now is adjusting that constant variable in the equation to dial in to make sure that this says I've got 0.3 gallons, about 0.3 gallons of filtered water. I'm going to go measure it by weight, by weighing it, and then use density to calculate the gallons that way, and then verify and see, did I actually get 0.3 gallons or not? Same on the waste side. I'm going to measure the weight. I'm collecting it in a bucket, and then verify, is my waste sensor right? So that's really what I'm doing now. Now what I want to do is I want to run back outside, and I want to just show you how the system is functioning. Okay, so here we are. You can see the boxes are on and running. This is the waste line coming out. It's not much because, again, the filtered water it's 0.1 gallons per minute, so it's a pretty slow system. Not much you're going to see here other than no leaks, which is great. Took me a minute to get that fixed. So this is the filtration system. I don't know if you can hear the motor. The motor is running. You can see it's got a nice pressure gauge on it. So it is up to pressure. It's about 60 psi going through the system. That fluctuates as well, which is another thing that you kind of got to account for. And then finally, it might be hard to see, but we do have water coming out, filling up the bucket. So that's it. Next thing I want to do is I'll run you back inside and we'll take a look at the database and compare the final numbers. So we'll do that next. Okay, so now that you've seen how we control it, how we gather data, and seen the system in action, let's take a look at some of the results. So what you see here is my database. I'm using a SQLite database, and this is just a simple DB browser program that makes it easier to view the database files. This is the actual data that was pulled from the system and from the flow meter specifically. So you can see a couple of things. Here's first of all the columns for the flow rates. We're not using the wart. It's not set up yet. That'll be for later after we set up the pump. So that one we're not using, but obviously we're using the inlet, filtered, and waste. This is the flow rates. And then these are the cumulative numbers. So how much volume has passed through the sensor over time. These are what we're going to use to check and see how close they actually got to what was actually passed through the system, and to get its inlet, filtered, and waste. Okay, so this is when the session was started. You can see zeros. There's a little bit of residual here. Not sure what that is, but it's so small it doesn't even matter. And then we come forward here and we turn the system on, and you can see kind of what I described in the numbers here. So first thing that happens is that we get this huge surge on the inlet side, which kind of makes sense because that's where the inlet valve turns on. You know, the pressure from the house is really high. That rushes right into the filtration system. So you get a big spike there, almost 2 gallons per minute. And then it starts to basically dump that out the waste side of it until the system gets up to pressure and the pump turns on, and then it starts, you know, putting out the actual filtered water. So it's just really nice to see that in the data as well. That tells you that the sensors are actually reflecting reality. So that means that the readings are coming through as expected. This is just a weird characteristic of how the hardware works, but it's a good sign regardless, because it means your system makes sense. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I'm going to scroll through these, and really what I'm looking for is, well, the most important thing is I'm looking for any gaps. So two things, I guess. I'm looking for gaps, and then I'm making sure that the cumulative numbers are adding over time. And what that's looking for is I want to make sure there's no gaps where the sensors might have either shorted out or missed, you know, a signal, or my board maybe didn't pick up the interrupts. I want to see a nice steady flow. I want to see pretty consistent flow rates, and I want to see a nice addition over time of those of the total volumes going through. So that's really what I'm looking for. So the system's kind of stabilized, and you can see the flow rates are very, pretty consistent. And if you look at how the numbers are adding up over time, it makes sense. They're sequentially, growing over time. And so that's really what we see here. So as I'm going to scroll towards the bottom, we're getting pretty close to where I shut the system off. Okay, so here we go. So here's where the system was shut off. Now there's another weird thing that happens here that you can see. When the filtration system shuts off, it again purges for some reason. I'm not exactly sure. But this is what I was talking about, where it's critical to have that three-way valve flipped over to waste. Because if you look at the waste side, you get a huge spike again, a gallon per minute. And that puts out, almost a quarter of a gallon of fluid. And so you definitely don't want that going into the filtered water system. That'll throw your whole process way off. So because it's directed to the waste, now it basically just all goes to the waste, which is no big deal. But there is something weird here where the system does do kind of a reset when I shut off the circuits. Even though the session's still running, it kind of treats that as an end. I'm not sure why. I got to dig into that. But what you see here is that these are the totals, and then it starts over from zero and adds. So essentially what I do is I just add in this waste back to what was measured at the end before I shut everything off to get the total number. Again, that's just something I got to dig into and troubleshoot a little bit. So that's that. So now let's talk about how did we do. So I've got a spreadsheet here where I'm tracking the different runs I've done over time. So each little group here is a run that I've done, and you can see this kind of top part is the waste, and the filtered part is the bottom is the filtered part. And so this was the bucket starting weight, so that I can pull that out and just measure the water, by itself. This was the final reading next to it. So at the end, I measured it with the water and the bucket. And then these numbers here on either side is where I subtract out the bucket to get the weight in ounces. Then using the density, I converted that into gallons. So that's the actual gallons that pass through the system. And then next to it, I have, here's what the system told me it was. So this one is the most recent run that you just saw. And there's a couple of things that are interesting here. So first of all, the numbers were pretty close, not exact, or not. I'm not comfortable with them yet. I want to continue to fine tune it. But there's something here that's pretty interesting. So if you look at the progression of this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is my fifth, and what these numbers here on top, this is that constant variable I was telling you about that converts the pulses to the gallons. You can see here where we started off high. This was like the recommended setting, and we've come down gradually over time. And so basically what I'm trying to do is get closer, because every time the system was undershooting what was actually put through the system. So that's kind of what you're seeing here in this progression, is that we started off really far off. I think it was like 50%. Yeah, that's a little bit screwed up. But anyway, it's like we were, 0.4 to 0.6, 0.3 to 0.4. So it was like 40% off, something like that. It was widely off. Then in the next one, we got better. We dropped the number way down. We got better. Then we tried to fine tune it. We were off again. I kept the same settings and repeated it just to see, was there variability in the sensors each time, or was it actually just the variable? And you can see it held pretty firm, especially on the filtered side. So what I was trying to do ultimately is I wanted to get it to a point where I was overshooting. I wasn't undershooting, because then I would know what my other bound is on that variable setting. And what's cool about this last run is that I think we finally did it. So now you can see what the system told, or what the system thought on the filtered side, was that there was about 0.73 gallons gone through. The actual what went through was 0.66 gallons. So now it finally has overshot, which is actually a good thing, because now I can fine tune it from here. Now I know this number is too much on the overestimating side. I know these numbers, that's what gave me on the underestimating side. So now I've got my bounds and I can really continue, I can start to fine tune it. On the waste side, actually, we just got close. So we didn't overshoot on the waste side, but we are still very close on that number, which is, again, a good sign. I mean, the closer you get, the better, but really you want to find that bound where you can draw a line in the sand and say, okay, now I know my range, now we're just going to fine tune it. So that's really where I'm at right now. I'm getting closer. This is only five quick runs, so we're doing a pretty good job of it. And then, I don't know how much longer it's going to take. Maybe another 3, 4, 5 runs of doing this. I should have it locked in where my flow sensors are giving me the reliable volumes through the system. And then once I have that, then I know my filtration system's good, and I'll be at the point where I can enter my target. Say I want 7 gallons of filtered water, and then I can just hit start, and the system will monitor these readings. It will monitor what's gone through the system, based on these readings that you're seeing here, and that it'll say, okay, where are we trying to get? So as it gets 3, 4, 5 gallons, it's getting closer, and it'll actually calculate the time left to reach that target. And then ultimately what I want to have it do is shut itself off. So after it's reached the target, I want it to deactivate those individual circuits and then shut the system off. And then we're going to move on to the next phase of it. So that's where we're at. We made a lot of progress since the last video. We're actually meaningfully controlling the hardware, and we're logging data. So this is a huge first step. We're really on our way to automation and optimization. Like I said earlier, next steps is going to be tying into the brew kettle to the temperature sensor and the heating element so that I can actually control the kettle with my software. And then after that, I need to build out the other half of the system, which is going to be the pump system, the specific gravity monitoring system, and then another 3-way valve to change from recirculating the wort to pumping it out to the fermenter when we're done. So those will be the last steps, but now that I've kind of got these things dialed in, it'll be much easier for me going forward because the 3-way valve is it's the same one that I'm already using. So I know that already works. It'll be very easy to plug that in. My flow meter is, again, it's the same one that I'm using here. So I know it works, I know how it works. I'll be starting from a much better spot. So everything should go a little bit more smoothly from here on out. But we'll see, who knows, there's always stuff that comes up. So make sure you stay tuned. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. That helps me out a lot, and it makes sure that you guys get updates when the latest stuff comes out. Because as I mentioned before, once this project's done, I'm going to move on to a lot of other really cool things with software, hardware, AI, edge computing, all of that stuff. And if you have any questions, please leave comments or reach out to me. If you've got ideas for projects that you'd like to see, I'd be more than happy to take that into consideration in the future too, to put together some videos and show you how I would do things to hopefully get you guys a little bit more help to what you need instead of me just kind of like talking and doing things that I think cool. I'd much rather spend my time helping you out. That's kind of the whole reason why I'm doing this, not really just to showcase, what I can do. I really want to help you. So please reach out, like and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one and see you in the comments. Thanks.